billionaire grandma froze at a black girl's necklace. Then she burst into tears and hugged her. The moment Octavia saw the hummingbird locket around the girl's neck, her billion-dollar composure shattered. Because that necklace was supposed to be buried with her daughter. She reached out and touched the girl's necklace with trembling fingers, and whispered 4 words that would destroy them both. "That was my daughter's." The necklace had survived 16 years, 5 foster homes, and 1,000 lonely nights. Hi there! Thank you for stopping by to listen to this wonderful story today. While you relax and ready to enjoy the story, please hit that subscribe button, thumbs up, and make sure you share this story to your loved ones. And please do not forget to tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Now let's get started. The champagne flutes sparkled like tiny stars under the crystal chandeliers of the Ashford Grand. But Octavia Hargrave didn't touch hers. She never did. She stood near the marble column at the edge of the ballroom. A silk ivory gown draped over her thin frame, her silver hair swept into a flawless chignon. Her eyes, pale gray, sharp as winter, scanned the crowd with the precision of a woman who had learned long ago that survival meant never being caught off guard. "Mrs. Hargrave." A voice purred beside her. It was Gerald, her PR director, holding a tablet like a shield. "The mayor wants a photo, and the Arts Council is asking if you'll say a few words." "No," Octavia said softly, her tone a blade wrapped in velvet. "They're expecting." "Then let them expect." Gerald nodded and retreated. He knew better than to push. Everyone did. Octavia had perfected this role. The dignified widow, the gracious benefactor, the woman whose name opened doors and whose checks built wings onto hospitals. She had donated millions. She had shaken hands with presidents. She had smiled through every tribute to her late husband, every charity gala, every ribbon cutting. But she had not felt a single thing in 10 years. Not since Lillian. She turned toward the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Beyond it, the Atlantic stretched cold and black beneath the moon. She used to love the ocean. Lillian had too. They'd spent summers on the cliffs, barefoot and laughing, back when Octavia still remembered how to laugh. Now the sea was just a void. Like everything else. Her fingers drifted to her collarbone, where a phantom weight still pressed, where she used to wear a locket. A hummingbird, gold, delicate. She'd given it to Lillian on her 16th birthday. She hadn't seen it since the day Lillian died. Octavia closed her eyes. Stop. She couldn't afford to go there. Not here. Not ever. She turned back to the crowd, her mask firmly in place, and floated through the rest of the evening like a woman made of smoke. Across town, in a building that smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet, Zuri Adeyemi sat cross-legged on the floor of the Harborview Community Center, surrounded by a fortress of donation boxes. "Zuri, baby, you don't gotta organize all that tonight," Miss Imani called from the kitchen, her voice warm and worn like a favorite sweater. "I'm almost done," Zuri called back, pulling another stack of kids' books from a box and sorting them by age group. She liked it here. The center was small and underfunded, but it was hers in a way nothing else ever had been. She'd been volunteering since she was 13, back when Miss Imani first fostered her. 3 years later, she still came every week. It was the only place that felt like it needed her. Zuri wiped her hands on her jeans and leaned back against the wall, letting her head thump softly against the painted cinder block. Her fingers found the necklace at her throat. Habit, comfort, mystery. The locket was small and gold, engraved with a hummingbird mid-flight. She'd worn it every day since she could remember. It was the only thing she had from before. Before the fire station. Before the system. Before the string of homes that never kept her. Miss Imani said it was a miracle she still had it. Zuri called it an anchor. She flipped it open. Inside was a photo so faded she could barely make out the face anymore. A woman young smiling. No name. No note. Just a picture, and a question Zuri had carried her whole life. Who were you? She snapped it shut. Don't go down that road tonight, Z, she muttered to herself. Talking to yourself again? Zuri looked up. Her best friend, Kayla, stood in the doorway grinning, her box braids tied up in a colorful scarf. Only 'cause you're late, Zuri shot back, smiling despite herself. Traffic. And my mama made me bring you this. Kayla held up a foil-covered plate. Jerk chicken. She said you're too skinny. I love your mama. Everyone does. They sat together on the floor, sharing the food in comfortable silence. Kayla didn't push. She never did. That's why Zuri trusted her. Hey, Kayla said eventually. You hear about tomorrow? What about it? Some rich ladies coming to tour the center. PR thing. Probably gonna write a check and leave. Zuri rolled her eyes. Great. Another saint. Imani says we gotta be on our best behavior. She wants you here. Why me? 'Cause you're the face of this place, Z. You know that. Zuri didn't respond. She just fingered the necklace again and stared out the window at the dark street beyond. She'd spent 16 years wondering where she came from. She didn't know that tomorrow, the answer would walk through the door. Octavia stood in her bedroom that night, staring at Lillian's portrait above the mantel. Her daughter's eyes seemed to follow her, asking the question Octavia could never answer. Why didn't you fight harder? I tried, Octavia whispered into the silence. But had she? Or had she let grief turn her into stone? What would you do if you lost everything? Would you shut down, or keep searching? Drop your thoughts below. Octavia arrived at the Harborview Community Center at exactly 10 a.m. because she arrived everywhere at exactly the time she said she would. Control was her religion. Punctuality, her prayer. The building was smaller than she expected. A squat brick structure wedged between a laundromat and a corner store, its paint peeling near the roofline. The sign above the door read Harborview Community Center in faded letters, and beneath it, someone had taped a handwritten banner. Welcome, Mrs. Hargrave. She felt nothing. Gerald opened the car door. They're very excited to meet you. I'm sure, Octavia said coolly, stepping onto the cracked pavement in her cream Chanel suit and pearl earrings. She looked like she'd been airlifted from a different planet. Inside, the center smelled like coffee and crayons. A small crowd had gathered, volunteers, staff, a few kids. Miss Imani Cole, the director, rushed forward with a wide, nervous smile. Mrs. Hargrave, thank you so much for coming. We are just, oh my goodness, we're so honored. Octavia shook her hand with practiced grace. It's my pleasure. It wasn't, but she'd learned long ago how to say the right things, smile the right way, and make people believe she cared. Philanthropy was theater, and she was a flawless actress. Miss Imani launched into a tour, showing her the after-school reading corner, the food pantry, the art room with its mismatched chairs and peeling poster board. Octavia nodded at all the right moments, her face a mask of polite interest. And then she saw her. The girl was crouched near a stack of boxes by the far wall, sorting through books with quick, precise movements. She wore a faded denim jacket over a black t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Her skin was a deep, warm brown, and her face, sharp cheekbones, full lips, serious eyes, had the kind of beauty that didn't ask for attention but commanded it anyway. Octavia wouldn't have noticed her at all, except for the necklace. It caught the light as the girl stood, a flash of gold against her collarbone. Octavia's breath stopped. Time didn't slow. It shattered. The hummingbird, delicate wings mid-flight, the same engraving, the same chain. No! Her vision tunneled. The voices around her became distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought she might collapse. Mrs. Hargrave? Miss Imani's voice sounded far away. Are you all right? Octavia didn't answer. She couldn't. She was already moving. Her heels clicked across the linoleum, sharp, rhythmic, unstoppable. The girl looked up, confused, as this elegant stranger crossed the room like a woman possessed. Octavia stopped inches away. Up close, the necklace was unmistakable. Where? Her voice cracked. She tried again. Where did you get that? The girl blinked, her hand instinctively rising to touch the locket. Excuse me? That necklace. Octavia's hand trembled as she reached out, her fingers hovering just above the gold chain. Where did you get it? The girl stepped back, her eyes narrowing. Why? Please. Octavia's voice broke, and with it, every wall she'd built in 10 years. Please, just tell me. The room had gone silent. Everyone was watching. The girl's jaw tightened. I've had it my whole life. That's not possible. Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but I gave that necklace to my daughter. Octavia's voice was barely a whisper now, but it cut through the air like a knife. I gave it to her on her 16th birthday. And she... Her breath hitched. She died wearing it. The girl stared at her, frozen. Octavia's hand finally touched the locket, her fingers grazing the cool metal, and the dam broke. A sob tore out of her, raw, guttural, 10 years of grief ripping free all at once. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall, but barely. Mrs. Hargrave. Gerald rushed forward, but she held up a shaking hand to stop him. She couldn't stop staring at the girl, at her eyes, at the shape of her face, at the way she stood, proud, defensive, guarded, just like Lillian. Who are you? Octavia whispered. The girl's voice was cold now, protective. My name is Zuri. Zuri, Octavia repeated, tasting the name like something sacred. And I don't know what kind of game this is, but I didn't steal this. It's mine. I'm not. Octavia's voice broke again. I'm not accusing you of anything. I need to know. Please. Where did it come from? Zuri's eyes flickered. Something vulnerable broke through her armor for just a second. I don't know, okay? I was left at a fire station when I was a baby. This necklace was all I had. The air left the room. Octavia staggered backward, her hand pressed to her mouth. What fire station? She whispered. I don't know. I was an infant. What year? Zuri hesitated. 2014. February. Octavia's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, her entire body shaking. Her mind was racing, spiraling, reconstructing a nightmare she'd spent a decade trying to forget. Lillian had died in February 2014, giving birth. They told her the baby didn't make it. They told her there was nothing they could do. But what if they lied? What if he lied? Octavia looked up at Zuri, her vision blurred with tears, and saw her daughter's face staring back at her. Oh my God, she breathed. Zuri took another step back, shaking her head. You need to leave. Please. I said leave. But Octavia couldn't move. She sat there, trembling, staring at this girl, this stranger, who might be the answer to every prayer she'd stopped praying. I think... Octavia's voice was barely audible. I think you might be my granddaughter. The words hung in the air like a lit fuse. Zuri's face went completely still, and then she turned and walked out. Miss Imani knelt beside Octavia, her voice soft. Mrs. Hargrave, do you really think? Octavia didn't answer. She just stared at the door Zuri had disappeared through, her mind screaming one question. What if I've been living in a grave I dug myself? If you discovered the child you thought you lost might still be alive, would you chase the truth or protect yourself from more heartbreak? Tell us what you do. Zuri didn't stop walking until she was outside, past the corner store, halfway down the block. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She pressed her back against the brick wall of a closed barbershop and sucked in air like she'd been drowning. Her hand went to the necklace. She gripped it so tight the edges cut into her palm. That was my daughter's. The woman's voice replayed in her head, over and over, like a song she couldn't turn off. No, Zuri whispered to herself. No, no, no. She'd heard stories like this before. Foster kids always did. Some rich person shows up, sees something they think they recognize, makes wild accusations. It was always about control, always about taking something. And Zuri had spent 16 years making sure nobody took anything from her ever again. Footsteps approached. She looked up. Kayla was jogging toward her, breathless. Z, what the hell just happened in there? I don't want to talk about it. That lady collapsed. Miss Imani's freaking out. She's saying, I don't care what she's saying. Zuri pushed off the wall and started walking again. Kayla grabbed her arm. Zuri, stop. Let go. Not until you talk to me. Zuri spun around, her eyes blazing. She looked at my necklace like I stole it, Kayla. Like I'm some kind of thief. And then she made up this crazy story about her dead daughter and... Her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. I'm not doing this again. Doing what again? Hoping. The word came out like a curse. I'm not hoping that some stranger is gonna swoop in and save me. I'm not that stupid anymore. Kayla's face softened. Z, I'm fine. Zuri yanked her arm free. I just need to be alone. She turned and walked away before Kayla could stop her again. Back inside the community center, Octavia sat in the small director's office, a glass of water trembling in her hands. She hadn't touched it. Miss Imani hovered nearby, wringing her hands. Gerald stood by the door, phone in hand, clearly itching to manage the situation. Mrs. Hargrave, he said carefully, perhaps we should postpone the rest of the visit. You've had a shock. We can reschedule. No. Her voice was quiet, but it had the weight of a vault door closing. Gerald fell silent. Octavia set the glass down on the desk, her hands still shaking. She looked up at Miss Imani. That girl. Zuri. Tell me about her. Miss Imani hesitated. I don't know if I should. Please. There was something in Octavia's voice, something raw and desperate, that made Miss Imani sit down. She's been with me for 3 years, Miss Imani said softly. Before that, she was in 6 different homes. She's brilliant, tough as nails. But she doesn't trust easy, Mrs. Hargrave. She's been hurt too many times. Where did she come from? Before the system? She was abandoned, left at a fire station in New Haven when she was just a few days old. No note, no name, just that necklace. Octavia closed her eyes. New Haven. That's where Lillian had been. That's where Thorne took her when she went into labor, because he didn't want Octavia involved. He said it was a private hospital. He said the baby didn't survive. He said a lot of things. Mrs. Hargrave, Miss Imani said gently, I don't know what you think you saw, but I know what I saw. Octavia's eyes opened, sharp and clear. That necklace belonged to my daughter. There is no other one like it. It was custom-made. Miss Imani's face paled. You think Zuri is? I don't know. Octavia's voice wavered. But I have to find out. Gerald stepped forward. With all due respect, this could be a very delicate situation. Legally, emotionally. If you're wrong, it could be damaging for everyone involved. And if I'm right? Octavia shot back, her voice stronger now. If I'm right, Gerald, then my granddaughter has been out there for 16 years, and I did nothing. You didn't know. I should have. Her voice broke. I should have demanded to see her. I should have fought. But I was so broken. I believed him. Believed who? Octavia didn't answer. She couldn't say his name. Not yet. Miss Imani leaned forward. Mrs. Hargrave, if you want to pursue this, you're going to need to go slow. Zuri's been through a lot. She's not going to just accept this. I don't expect her to. Then what do you want? Octavia stood, smoothing her suit with hands that were finally starting to steady. I want 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to explain. That's all I'm asking. Miss Imani looked uncertain. I'll talk to her, but I can't make any promises. That's all I need. An hour later, Zuri sat on the bleachers at the old basketball court near her foster home, staring at nothing. The necklace hung heavy around her neck. Her phone buzzed. Miss Imani. She wants to talk to you. No pressure. But I think you should hear her out. Zuri typed back fast. Zuri, why? Miss Imani. Because you've been asking about that necklace your whole life. And maybe she has answers. Zuri stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She thought about all the times she'd opened the locket and stared at the faded picture inside. All the time she'd imagined a mother who loved her, who didn't want to give her up, who had no choice. She thought about the look in that woman's eyes. Not anger, not accusation, grief. Zuri took a breath. Zuri, 5 minutes. That's it. Octavia sat in her car outside the community center, waiting. Yvette, her housekeeper, had driven over when she heard what happened. Now she sat in the passenger seat, holding Octavia's hand. What if she doesn't come? Octavia whispered. Then you try again tomorrow. What if I'm wrong? Yvette squeezed her hand. What if you're not? Octavia closed her eyes and let herself imagine it. Just for a second. A granddaughter. Lillian's child. Alive. A reason to feel again. And then she saw her. Zuri, walking toward the car, hands shoved in her pockets, face unreadable. Octavia's breath caught. Please, she prayed to no one and everyone. Please let this be real. Zuri opened the back door of the car and slid in without a word. She didn't look at Octavia, just stared straight ahead, arms crossed, jaw set. Octavia turned in her seat, her heart racing. Thank you, she said softly, for coming. Zuri said nothing. Yvette glanced at Octavia, then quietly stepped out of the car to give them space. The door closed with a soft click, sealing them in silence. Octavia folded her hands in her lap, trying to steady herself. She'd rehearsed this 100 times in her head on the way over. But now, sitting here, all her careful words dissolved. I know this sounds insane, she began. It does. Zuri's voice was flat, guarded, a wall 10 feet thick. Octavia swallowed. But I need you to hear me out. Please. Zuri finally turned to look at her. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, older than 16. You've got 5 minutes. Octavia nodded. She took a breath and began. My daughter's name was Lillian. She was 23 when she died. Her voice wavered, but she pushed through. She'd gotten involved with a man, Thorne. I didn't approve. We fought. She left. And by the time I tried to reconcile, it was too late. Zuri's expression didn't change, but Octavia saw her fingers tighten around her own arms. She was pregnant, Octavia continued. 7 months. Thorne called me one night and said she'd gone into early labor. There were complications. She hemorrhaged. They couldn't save her. Octavia's voice cracked. She paused, closing her eyes. He told me the baby didn't make it either, that she was too premature, that there was nothing they could do. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Zuri. I was sedated, devastated. I never saw the body. I never asked questions. I just believed him. Zuri's jaw clenched. So you think I'm that baby? I think it's possible. Because of a necklace. Because of that necklace. Octavia leaned forward slightly, her voice urgent now. I had it made for Lillian when she turned 16. It was one of a kind. The hummingbird was her favorite bird. She wore it every single day. She was wearing it the night Thorne took her to the hospital. Zuri's hand drifted to the locket, almost unconsciously. I looked for it after she died, Octavia said. I asked Thorn where it was. He said it must have been lost in the chaos. But it wasn't lost, was it? Zuri stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled the necklace off. Octavia's breath hitched. Zuri held it out between them, the gold chain dangling from her fingers. This is all I have. No name, no story, just this. She opened the locket. Inside was the faded photograph. A young woman with dark curls and a soft smile. Octavia's hand flew to her mouth. That's her, she whispered. That's Lillian. Zuri's face flickered, just for a second, before the mask came back up. She snapped the locket shut. A picture doesn't prove anything. Then let me prove it. Octavia's voice was desperate now. A DNA test. It's simple. If I'm wrong, I'll leave you alone. But if I'm right, her voice broke. If I'm right, then you're my granddaughter. And I have spent 10 years mourning you when you were alive. Zuri looked away, her jaw working. Why now? She asked quietly. What? If this guy, Thorn, lied to you, why didn't you figure it out before? Why'd it take 16 years? The question hit like a slap. Octavia's face crumpled. Because I was a coward. Zuri looked back at her, surprised. I was drowning in grief, Octavia said, her voice raw. And I let it swallow me. I didn't fight. I didn't ask the hard questions. I just shut down. Tears streamed down her face now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. I failed Lillian. I failed you, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, and I'm asking you to let me try. Zuri stared at her. For the first time, the wall cracked. You don't even know me, Zuri said, her voice smaller now. No, Octavia whispered, but I'd like to. Silence filled the car. Zuri looked down at the necklace in her hand. Then, slowly, she put it back on. One test, she said. Octavia exhaled, a sob catching in her throat. Thank you, but I'm not calling you Grandma or anything. Not until I know for sure. I understand. Zuri reached for the door handle, then paused. She looked back at Octavia, her face unreadable. That picture, she said quietly, in the locket. I used to stare at it when I was little. I used to make up stories about who she was. I told myself she loved me, that she didn't want to leave me. Octavia's heart shattered. She did love you, Octavia whispered. She would have loved you so much. Zuri nodded once, then got out of the car. Octavia watched her walk away, her vision blurred with tears. Yvette climbed back into the driver's seat. You okay? Octavia shook her head. No, but you're going to keep going. Yes. Yvette smiled gently. Good. That night, Zuri lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The necklace rested against her collarbone, warm from her skin. Miss Imani had agreed to accompany her to the DNA test. It would happen in 2 days. 2 days to find out if the last 16 years of her life had been a lie. 2 days to find out if she actually had family. Zuri turned on her side and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come, because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the fear and all the armor, a tiny, dangerous spark of hope had ignited. And she didn't know if she was strong enough to survive it being snuffed out. Across town, Octavia sat in Lillian's old bedroom. She hadn't been in here in years. The walls were still pale blue. The sketches Lillian had drawn were still pinned to the corkboard. Her favorite books were still stacked on the nightstand. Octavia picked up a framed photo from the dresser. Lillian at 17, laughing, the hummingbird necklace glinting at her throat. I found her, Octavia whispered. I think I found her, baby. She pressed the frame to her chest and let herself cry. Not the silent, suffocating tears she'd cried for 10 years, but the loud, gasping sobs of a woman who'd finally let herself feel again. And it hurt. God, it hurt. But it also felt like waking up. The DNA testing clinic was sterile and quiet, the kind of place where every sound felt too loud. Zuri sat in the waiting room, bouncing her knee, Miss Imani's hand resting gently on her shoulder. Octavia arrived exactly on time, Yvette at her side. Their eyes met across the room. Octavia offered a small, tentative smile. Zuri looked away. The process was quick. A cheek swab, a form, a promise that results would be ready in 72 hours. When it was over, they stood in the parking lot, the October wind biting at their faces. "Would you?" Octavia hesitated. "Would you like to come to my home? Just for a little while. I have some things I'd like to show you." "About Lillian." Zuri glanced at Miss Imani, who nodded gently. "Okay," Zuri said, "but just for an hour." "Of course." The Emerald Crest estate sat high on the cliffs overlooking Ashford Bay, a sprawling stone mansion that looked like it had been carved out of old money and older secrets. Zuri stared up at it from the circular driveway, her stomach twisting. "You live here?" she asked. "I do." "Alone?" Octavia's face flickered with something sad. "Yes." Yvette led them inside. The foyer was all marble and chandelier light, the kind of space that swallowed sound. Zuri felt small, out of place, but Octavia didn't take her to the grand rooms. Instead, she led her upstairs, down a long hallway, and stopped in front of a closed door. She rested her hand on the handle, her breath shaky. "This was Lillian's room," she said quietly. "I haven't changed anything." She opened the door. Zuri stepped inside and froze. The room was like a time capsule. Pale blue walls, a four-poster bed with white linens, bookshelves crammed with novels and sketch pads, a wooden easel by the window, still holding a half-finished painting of the ocean. But it was the corkboard that pulled Zuri forward. Dozens of sketches were pinned to it, charcoal drawings of birds, faces, hands. And in the center, a self-portrait. Zuri stared at it. The girl in the drawing had dark curls, deep eyes, and a small, crooked smile. She looked like Zuri. "She was an artist," Octavia said softly, stepping beside her. "She used to sit by that window for hours, just drawing. She said the light was perfect there." Zuri's throat tightened. She reached out and touched the edge of the drawing, her fingers trembling. "She looks like you," Octavia finished. "I know." Zuri pulled her hand back, wrapping her arms around herself. "Tell me what happened. The real story." Octavia nodded. She moved to the bed and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "Lillian met Thorne when she was 21, she began. "He was charming, ambitious. He worked in finance, came from a decent family. But there was something off about him. I couldn't put my finger on it. A coldness." She paused, her gaze distant. Lillian didn't see it. Or maybe she did, and she thought she could fix him. They moved fast, too fast. Within 6 months, she was pregnant. Zuri sat down in the chair by the window listening. "I was controlling," Octavia admitted, her voice thick with regret. "I didn't approve. I said things I shouldn't have. I told her she was making a mistake, that she was throwing her life away." Her voice cracked. "And she left. She told me she didn't need me, that she'd be fine without me." A tear slid down Octavia's cheek. "I was so angry, so proud. I didn't call her, didn't reach out. I told myself she'd come back when she was ready." She looked up at Zuri, her eyes red. "But she never got the chance." "What happened the night she died?" Zuri asked quietly. Octavia closed her eyes, the memory washing over her like ice water. Flashback. February 2014. The phone rang at 2 a.m. Octavia jolted awake, her heart already pounding. No one called at 2 a.m. with good news. "Mrs. Hargrave?" Thorne's voice was flat, detached. "It's Lillian." She went into labor. There were complications. Octavia was already out of bed, pulling on clothes. Where are you? St. Catherine's in New Haven. But I'm coming. Mrs. Hargrave, she's gone. The world stopped. What? She hemorrhaged. They couldn't stop it. She's gone. Octavia's legs buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the bed, gasping for air. And the baby, she whispered. Silence. Thorn. The baby. Didn't make it. His voice was cold, clinical. She was too early. I'm sorry. Octavia collapsed. She didn't remember the drive to the hospital. Didn't remember Yvette holding her up as they walked through the halls. Didn't remember the doctor's words, the paperwork, the condolences. All she remembered was Thorn, standing in the hallway, his face blank. Where is she? Octavia had demanded. I want to see her. They've already taken her to the morgue. And the baby? Mrs. Hargrave, there's no point. I want to see my granddaughter. Thorn's jaw tightened. There's nothing to see. She didn't survive the birth. It's better this way. Better? Octavia's voice rose, cracking. How is any of this better? But Thorn just turned and walked away. And Octavia, broken and sedated and drowning in grief, didn't fight. She just let them take her home. Present. Octavia opened her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I never saw her body, she whispered. I never demanded to. I just believed him. And I have hated myself for that every single day since. Zuri's hands were clenched in her lap, her eyes glistening. You think he lied, she said. I know he lied. Octavia's voice was hard now, edged with anger. He gave you away, Zuri. I don't know why. I don't know how. But that necklace, Lillian was wearing it when she went into labor. And somehow, it ended up with you. Zuri stood abruptly, pacing to the window. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Why would he do that? She asked, her voice tight. I don't know. Octavia stood, moving toward her carefully. But I'm going to find out. Zuri turned, her face raw with emotion. What if the test comes back negative? What if I'm not? What if this is all just a coincidence? Octavia stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Then I'll still be grateful I met you, because for the first time in 10 years, I feel something other than grief. Zuri's breath hitched, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, I want it to be true. Octavia's face crumpled. So do I. They stood there, two broken women on opposite sides of a chasm, reaching for each other across the dark. That night, Octavia made a call. I need you to find someone, she said into the phone. Thorn Hargrave. I don't care where he is. I don't care what it costs. Find him. She hung up and stared out at the black ocean beyond her window. Somewhere out there, the man who destroyed her family was living his life. But not for long. Zuri came back the next day. She didn't plan to. She told herself she'd wait for the test results before getting any more involved. But when she woke up that morning, she couldn't stop thinking about Lillian's room, about the paintings, about the way Octavia's voice had cracked when she said, I failed you. So she texted Miss Imani, took the bus across town, and showed up at the iron gates of Emerald Crest just after noon. Yvette answered the intercom, her warm voice crackling through the speaker. Zuri, baby, come on up. She'll be so happy to see you. The gates swung open. Octavia was in the garden when Zuri found her. A sprawling, wild space behind the house where roses tangled with lavender and stone pathways wound through beds of herbs. She wore linen pants and a soft cardigan, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller here, more human. She was kneeling by a patch of mint, pulling weeds with bare hands. My mother planted this garden, Octavia said without looking up. She said mint was resilient, that it would grow back no matter how many times you tried to kill it. She smiled faintly. I think she was trying to tell me something. Zuri stepped closer, hands in her jacket pockets. You garden. I try. Octavia sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her fingers. It's one of the few things that quiets my mind. Zuri crouched down beside her. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, the October sun warm on their backs. I didn't think I'd come back, Zuri admitted. But you did. Yeah. Zuri picked at a blade of grass. I don't really know why. Octavia looked at her, her expression soft. Maybe because you're tired of running. Zuri's throat tightened. She didn't respond. Octavia stood, brushing off her knees. Come with me. I want to show you something. They walked down to the cliffs, a narrow trail that wound through tall grass and ended at a stone bench overlooking the sea. The wind was sharp here, salt-laced and wild. The waves crashed far below, relentless and loud. This was Lillian's favorite spot, Octavia said, sitting down on the bench. She used to come here when she was upset. She'd sit for hours, just watching the water. Zuri sat beside her, pulling her knees up to her chest. She had your stubbornness, Octavia continued, a faint smile on her lips. And your fire. When she was 15, she got into a fight with a boy at school who said women couldn't be real artists. She dumped paint all over his backpack. Zuri laughed, a real, surprised laugh. Seriously? Seriously. I had to go to the principal's office. I was mortified. Octavia's smile widened. But secretly, I was so proud of her. Zuri looked out at the ocean, her smile fading. What was she like? Really? Octavia was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. She was kind, she finally said, almost to a fault. She felt everything so deeply. Joy, sadness, love. It made her beautiful, but it also made her vulnerable. Her voice grew softer. She trusted too easily, loved too hard, and I think that's why Thorn was able to. She trailed off, her jaw tightening. To hurt her, Zuri finished. Octavia nodded. They sat in silence, the wind whipping around them. I used to pretend, Zuri said suddenly, her voice barely audible over the waves. When I was little, I'd pretend my mom was out there somewhere, thinking about me, missing me. She laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? No, Octavia said firmly. Not stupid. Zuri looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. She was thinking about you, Octavia said. I know she was. Even if she didn't get to hold you. Even if she didn't get to know you. She loved you, Zuri. I'm sure of it. Zuri's eyes filled with tears. She looked away quickly, swiping at her face. Octavia reached out slowly, carefully, and rested her hand on Zuri's shoulder. Zuri didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long time. Two women holding onto each other against the wind. Later, back at the house, Yvette made them lunch. Jerk chicken, rice and peas, fried plantains. Zuri ate like she hadn't had a real meal in weeks. This is amazing, she said, her mouth full. Yvette beamed. You come back anytime, child. I'll feed you proper. Octavia watched from across the table, a warmth spreading through her chest that she hadn't felt in years. After lunch, Zuri wandered into the library. A two-story room lined with books, a spiral staircase leading to a lofted reading nook. She ran her fingers along the spines, her eyes wide. You've read all these? She asked. Most of them. Octavia appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. Lillian used to hide up there. She nodded toward the loft. She'd read for hours. I'd have to drag her down for dinner. Zuri climbed the stairs and settled into the window seat, looking out over the estate. Octavia followed, handing her a mug. Thank you, Zuri said quietly. For the tea? For this? Zuri gestured vaguely. For not giving up. Octavia's eyes shimmered. I've already lost 10 years with you, Zuri. I don't intend to lose another day. Zuri looked down into her tea, her voice small. What if the test says we're not related? Octavia sat beside her, close but not touching. Then I'll still want you in my life, she said. If you'll have me. Zuri's breath caught. She looked up at Octavia, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. That maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found her way home. That evening, as the sun set over the water, Zuri stood at the window of Lillian's room. She'd asked if she could stay a little longer, and Octavia had nearly cried with relief. Yvette had made up the guest room, but Zuri found herself drawn back here, to this space that felt like it was waiting for her. She opened the locket around her neck and stared at the faded picture inside. "Hi, Mom," she whispered, and for the first time in her life, the word didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like a prayer. Downstairs, Octavia stood in her study, staring at her phone. A text had come through an hour ago. Found him. Thorne Hargrave, currently residing in Hartford. Sending full report now. Octavia's hand trembled as she opened the attachment. There he was, older, grayer, but unmistakable. The man who had stolen everything from her. She closed her eyes and took a breath. The test results would come tomorrow, and then, one way or another, she would have answers. But tonight, for the first time in a decade, she wasn't alone. And that was enough. The email arrived at 9:47 a.m. Subject: DNA test results, Octavia Hargrave and Zuri Bennett. Octavia stared at it on her laptop screen, her finger hovering over the trackpad. She was alone in her study, the morning light streaming through the tall windows. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She couldn't breathe. She'd prepared herself for this moment, rehearsed both outcomes in her mind 1,000 times. But now that it was here, she was paralyzed. What if I'm wrong? What if I lose her before I ever really had her? Her phone buzzed. Zuri, did you get it yet? Octavia's hands trembled as she typed back. Octavia, just arrived. Haven't opened it. Zuri, want me to come over? Octavia, please. 20 minutes later, Zuri stood in the study doorway, her face pale. Miss Imani had driven her. She waited in the foyer with Yvette, giving them space. You didn't open it, Zuri said. I wanted to wait for you. Zuri stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She crossed the room and stood beside Octavia's chair, staring down at the laptop. What if it's bad news? Zuri whispered. Octavia looked up at her, her eyes red-rimmed. Then we'll face it together. Zuri nodded, her jaw tight. Octavia took a breath, clicked the email, and opened the attachment. The PDF loaded. A wall of medical jargon filled the screen. Octavia scrolled down, her heart hammering, until she found the line that mattered. Probability of biological relationship: 99.97%. Conclusion: Octavia Hargrave is the biological grandmother of Zuri Bennett. The world went silent. Octavia's breath left her in a shattered gasp. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Zuri stared at the screen, unmoving. It's real, Octavia choked out. You're hers. You're Lillian's daughter. You're my granddaughter. She turned in her chair and looked up at Zuri, tears streaming down her face. You're mine! Zuri's face crumpled, and then she broke. A sob tore out of her, raw, guttural, 16 years of grief and loneliness and longing ripping free all at once. She collapsed into Octavia's arms, and Octavia held her like she should have held her the day she was born. I've got you, Octavia whispered, rocking her gently. I've got you, baby. I've got you. Zuri clung to her, sobbing into her shoulder. I thought no one wanted me. I wanted you. Octavia's voice broke. I wanted you so much. I just didn't know you were alive. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, crying together, mourning and celebrating all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both their faces were swollen and tear-streaked. But there was something different in their eyes now. Recognition. Belonging. Octavia cupped Zuri's face in her hands. You are not alone anymore. Do you hear me? You will never be alone again. Zuri nodded, unable to speak. Octavia pulled her close again, pressing a kiss to her forehead. My girl, she whispered. My beautiful girl. The celebration was short-lived. An hour later, after Miss Imani and Yvette had been told the news, after the tears and hugs and disbelief had settled into something real, Octavia's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She answered. Hello? Mrs. Hargrave. The voice was smooth, familiar, and ice-cold. Octavia's blood turned to stone. Thorne. Zuri looked up sharply. I hear you've been looking for me, Thorne continued, his tone casual, like they were old friends catching up. I thought I'd save you the trouble. Octavia's hand tightened around the phone. Where are you? Close enough. I wanted to congratulate you. I hear you found the girl. Octavia's stomach dropped. How do you? I have eyes everywhere, Octavia. You should know that by now. He paused. She's quite resilient, isn't she? I always wondered if she'd survive. You bastard. Octavia's voice was shaking with rage. You told me she was dead. I told you what you needed to hear. You stole my granddaughter. I saved her. His voice turned sharp. From you. From this life. Lillian didn't want her raised in your world, Octavia. She told me that herself. You're lying. Am I? He laughed softly. Ask yourself, why would I lie? What did I have to gain? Octavia's mind raced. Money. You wanted Lillian's trust fund. The trust fund was nothing compared to what I made in the markets. No, Octavia. This wasn't about money. His voice dropped venomous. This was about making sure that child didn't grow up to be another cold, emotionless Hargrave. Like you. Octavia's breath caught. You destroyed Lillian, Thorne hissed. Your control. Your expectations. Your constant disappointment. She was drowning under the weight of your perfection. And when she told me she was pregnant, she begged me not to let you anywhere near that baby. That's not true, isn't it? Thorne's voice was calm again, calculated. Think back, Octavia. The fights. The ultimatums. The way you made her feel like she was never good enough. She was terrified of you. Octavia's vision blurred. So I made a choice, Thorne continued. I gave the baby a chance at a real life. Away from you. Away from this prison you call a legacy. You left her at a fire station. Octavia's voice cracked. She grew up in foster care. Alone. Better alone than suffocated. You son of a... Careful, Octavia. You don't want to say something you'll regret. Silence stretched between them. Taut and dangerous. Why are you calling? Octavia finally asked, her voice deadly quiet. Because I want you to understand something. Thorne's tone shifted, cold and final. That girl may share your blood, but she will never be yours. You don't get a second chance. You don't get redemption. You lost Lillian, and you'll lose her too. Stay away from her. Or what? Thorne laughed. You'll destroy me? You can't touch me, Octavia. I'm untouchable. But you? He paused. You're exactly where I want you. Broken, desperate, clinging to a child who doesn't even know how toxic you really are. He hung up. Octavia stood there, the phone pressed to her ear, her entire body trembling. Zuri stood slowly. What did he say? Octavia turned to look at her, and Zuri saw something in her eyes she hadn't seen before. Fear. He knows, Octavia whispered. He knows you're here. And he's coming. That night, Octavia didn't sleep. She sat in Lillian's room, staring at the paintings, at the sketches, at the self-portrait that looked so much like Zuri. Thorne's words echoed in her head. You destroyed Lillian. She was terrified of you. Was it true? Had she driven her daughter away? Had she failed her so completely that Lillian would rather give up her child than let Octavia near her? Octavia pressed her hands to her face and wept. Because deep down, in the part of her she didn't want to look at, she knew he was right. Downstairs, Zuri lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she had family. A grandmother who wanted her. A home. A place to belong. But she also had a ghost. A man who had stolen her life before it even began. And a gnawing, terrible question. What if Octavia really was the reason her mother died? The DNA results sat unopened on Octavia's desk. She'd been staring at the envelope for 20 minutes, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing shallow. The paper was cream-colored, clinical, unremarkable. But inside it was the answer to a question that could either resurrect her or destroy her. Am I Zuri's grandmother? Yvette stood in the doorway, watching her with quiet concern. She'd been with the Hargrave family for 30 years, long enough to know when Octavia was about to shatter. You gonna open it? Yvette asked gently. Octavia shook her head. I don't know. What's stopping you? Fear. Octavia's voice was barely a whisper. If it says yes, then I have to live with the fact that I lost 10 years with her, that I gave up, that I let Thorne win. Her voice cracked. And if it says no, then I've been fooling myself, grasping at ghosts. Yvette crossed the room and sat down beside her. She didn't touch the envelope. She just rested her hand on Octavia's. Baby, Yvette said softly, using the term of endearment she reserved for moments like this. You've been half dead for a decade. I watched you bury yourself with Lillian. But these last few days, she squeezed Octavia's hand. I've seen you alive again. Octavia's eyes filled with tears. That girl brought you back, Yvette continued. Whether that paper says you share blood or not, the love is already real. You feel it. She feels it. Don't let fear steal that from you again. Octavia closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. What if she doesn't want me? She whispered. Then you fight for her anyway. Like you should have fought for Lillian. The words landed like a blow. Not cruel, but true. Octavia opened her eyes and looked at the envelope again. Then she stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the cliffs where Lillian used to sit. I'm not opening it yet, she said quietly. Yvette frowned. Why not? Because I need to go to her first. Octavia turned, her face set with a resolve Yvette hadn't seen in years. I need to tell her that it doesn't matter what that paper says. I need her to know that I choose her, results or not. Yvette smiled, her eyes glistening. Now that's the Octavia I remember. Across town, Zuri sat on the edge of her bed in Miss Imani's house, staring at the necklace in her hands. She hadn't taken it off in years. But tonight, she'd unclasped it and held it like it might burn her. The hummingbird caught the lamplight, glinting gold. Where did you come from? Who gave you to me? And why does it hurt so much to hope? A soft knock came at the door. Z? Miss Imani's voice was warm, careful. Can I come in? Yeah. Miss Imani entered, her frame filling the doorway. She wore her reading glasses and a faded robe, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf. She sat down on the bed beside Zuri, the mattress dipping under her weight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You've been holding that thing for an hour, Miss Imani finally said. Zuri nodded, her throat tight. You scared, Miss Imani said. Not a question. A fact. Yeah. Of what? Zuri's voice cracked. Of wanting something so bad and losing it again. Miss Imani's face softened. She reached over and gently took the necklace from Zuri's hands, holding it up to the light. You know what I see when I look at this? Miss Imani asked. What? Proof that somebody loved you. Her voice was firm, full of conviction. This wasn't thrown away, baby. This was placed. On purpose. With care. Whoever left you at that fire station made sure you had this. And that means something. Zuri's eyes burned with unshed tears. But what if Octavia's wrong? Zuri whispered. What if I'm not hers? What if I let myself believe it, and what if you are? Miss Imani interrupted gently. What if that woman is your blood, Z? What if she's been looking for you in every face she's seen for 10 years, and you're the answer she's been praying for? Zuri looked away, her jaw clenched against the sob building in her chest. You've spent your whole life looking for home, Miss Imani said softly. What if it's been looking for you too? The tears came then, hot, fast, unstoppable. Zuri doubled over, and Miss Imani pulled her close, holding her like she'd done 100 times before. I'm scared, Zuri sobbed into her shoulder. I know, baby. I know. What if she changes her mind? What if I'm not enough? Miss Imani pulled back and cupped Zuri's face in her hands, looking her dead in the eyes. Listen to me. You have always been enough. You hear me? Always. And any woman lucky enough to call you her granddaughter better know that. Zuri's breath hitched, but she nodded. Now, Miss Imani said, her voice turning gentle again. You got a choice to make. You can stay in this room, safe and scared. Or you can walk out that door and find out the truth. Either way, I got you. But baby, don't let fear make this choice for you. Zuri wiped her face, her hands shaking. She looked down at the necklace still resting in Miss Imani's palm. And slowly, carefully, she took it back. She clasped it around her neck and made her choice. 20 minutes later, Zuri stood outside the iron gates of the Emerald Crest estate, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. The intercom crackled. Hello? Yvette's voice, warm and familiar. Zuri swallowed hard. It's Zuri. Is she here? A pause. Then, baby, she's been waiting for you. The gates swung open. Zuri walked up the long, winding driveway, her hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, her breath clouding in the cold night air. And there, standing on the front steps in a cashmere sweater and bare feet, was Octavia. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red. But when she saw Zuri, she smiled, a real trembling, fragile smile. You came, Octavia whispered. Zuri stopped a few feet away, her voice thick. You said it didn't matter. What the test says. It doesn't. Then why do I feel like my whole life depends on it? Octavia's eyes filled with tears. Because you've been searching for this your whole life. And so have I. They stood there, two women on opposite sides of a chasm, both terrified to cross. And then Octavia held out her hand. I don't need a piece of paper to tell me who you are, Zuri, she said, her voice breaking. I know. I've known since the moment I saw that necklace. You're Lillian's daughter. You're my granddaughter. And I'm not letting you go. Not again. Zuri's face crumpled. And she reached out. Their hands met. And for the first time in 16 years, Zuri felt like she'd come home. They opened the envelope together. Not in Octavia's grand study, but in Lillian's room. The place where memory and hope had collided from the very beginning. Zuri sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tracing the embroidered pillowcase. Octavia stood by the window, the envelope trembling in her hands. You sure you want to do this? Octavia asked softly. Zuri looked up at her, and for the first time, there was no guardedness in her eyes. Just raw, vulnerable truth. Yeah, Zuri said. I'm sure. Octavia nodded. She slid her finger under the flap, tore it open, and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. Her eyes scanned the lines. And then she exhaled, a shaky, disbelieving breath that turned into a sob. It's positive, she whispered. Zuri, it's positive. Zuri's hands flew to her mouth. Probability of biological relationship. 99.97%. Octavia's voice broke as she read it aloud. You are Lillian's daughter. You're my granddaughter. The paper slipped from Octavia's hands and fluttered to the floor. She crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Zuri into her arms. Fierce, desperate, complete. Zuri clung to her, sobbing into her shoulder, and Octavia held her like she should have held her 16 years ago. I'm so sorry, Octavia choked out, her voice wrecked. I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm so sorry you were alone. I'm not alone anymore, Zuri whispered back, her voice muffled against Octavia's sweater. No, Octavia said, pulling back just enough to cup Zuri's face in her hands, tears streaming down both their faces. You're not, and you never will be again. They stayed like that for a long time. Grandmother and granddaughter. 2 halves of a broken story finally made whole. Later that evening, they sat together on the cliffs where Lillian used to sit. The sky was bruised with twilight, deep purples and burning oranges bleeding into the horizon. The wind was sharp and salt-laced, tugging at their hair and clothes. Zuri pulled her jacket tighter and stared out at the waves crashing far below. She used to come here a lot? Zuri asked. Every chance she got, Octavia said, a faint smile on her lips. She said it made her feel small in the best way. Like her problems didn't matter as much when she could see how big the world was. Zuri nodded slowly. I get that. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the ocean filling the space between them. Do you think she would have liked me? Zuri asked quietly. Octavia turned to her, her eyes shining. Zuri, she would have loved you. She would have been so proud of you. How do you know? Because I am. Zuri's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, picking at a thread on her jeans. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. The whole family thing. I've never had it before. Octavia reached over and gently took Zuri's hand in hers. Neither do I, she said honestly. I failed your mother in so many ways. I was controlling, distant, too afraid of losing her to let her really live. And when I lost her anyway, her voice cracked. I shut down. I stopped trying. I let grief win. She squeezed Zuri's hand. But I'm not doing that again, Octavia said, her voice stronger now. I don't know how to be a perfect grandmother, Zuri, but I know how to show up. I know how to fight. And I know how to love you. If you'll let me. Zuri looked at her, tears brimming in her eyes. I've wanted this my whole life, Zuri whispered. I just didn't think it was real. It's real, Octavia said firmly. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere. Zuri nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. And then slowly, she leaned her head against Octavia's shoulder. Octavia wrapped her arm around her and held her close, staring out at the endless ocean. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't feel empty. She felt full. 3 months later, the house felt different. Not just because Zuri had moved in, though her presence had breathed life into rooms that had been silent for too long. Her sneakers by the door, her books stacked on the coffee table, her laughter echoing through the halls. But it was more than that. Octavia had changed. She smiled more. She slept better. She let Yvette play music in the kitchen while they cooked together. She even laughed, really laughed, when Zuri taught her how to make TikToks despite her protests. Grandma, you gotta move your hips more, Zuri teased, demonstrating a dance move in the library. I am a 72-year-old woman, Zuri. I do not move my hips. You do now, Zuri grinned. Octavia tried, awkwardly, stiffly, and they both dissolved into laughter. It was a small moment, but it was everything. One evening, Zuri stood in front of Lillian's portrait in the main hallway, the one Octavia had kept covered for years. She'd unveiled it last week. Zuri stared up at her mother's face. young, beautiful, full of light. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. Octavia appeared beside her, holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to Zuri. "She looks like you," Zuri said softly. "No," Octavia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You look like her." Zuri smiled, her eyes glistening. "Do you think she knows?" Zuri asked. "That we found each other?" Octavia looked up at the portrait, her heart aching and whole at the same time. "I think she's been watching over you this whole time," Octavia said. "Making sure you survived. Making sure you found your way home." Zuri leaned into her, and Octavia wrapped her arm around her shoulders. "I'm glad I found you," Zuri whispered. "So am I, baby," Octavia whispered back. "So am I." That night, Octavia opened Lillian's journal, something she hadn't been able to do in years. On the last page, written in Lillian's looping handwriting, was a single entry dated 2 days before she died. "If something happens to me, I hope someone tells my daughter that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she was the best thing I ever made. I hope someone fights for her the way I wish I'd fought for myself." Octavia closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. "I found her, Lillian," she whispered into the quiet, "and I'm never letting her go." She walked down the hall to Zuri's room and knocked softly. "Come in," Zuri called. Octavia opened the door. Zuri was sitting on the bed, sketching in a notebook, something she'd started doing more and more lately. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, Grandma." Octavia's heart swelled every time she heard that word. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "I just wanted to say good night." "Good night," Zuri said. Octavia turned to leave, then paused. "Zuri, yeah, I love you." Zuri's face softened, her eyes shining. "I love you too, Grandma." Octavia smiled, a real, full, unguarded smile, and closed the door. She walked back to her room, climbed into bed, and for the first time in 10 years, she didn't dream of loss. She dreamed of the future. And somewhere, in the space between memory and hope, Lillian smiled too, because her daughter was finally home. They had both spent years searching for something they thought was lost forever. And in the end, love didn't just find them, it rebuilt them. What would you risk to find the family you thought you'd lost? What does home mean to you? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Red Heart.